Thank you guys for being such a great and attentive audience. I think we have time for a few questions if anybody has any. I will now note that you will all be afraid to shake my hand or kiss me on the cheek after this reading, and I apologize for that. Yeah?
Sandra, so how is it moving from poetry to
Right.
prose?
Well, I had tried to address this subject in poetry before, and actually those who attended my reading a year ago here at Square Books might remember that I read from a sequence called Allergy Girl. But even though poems captured some of the emotional impact of having this issue, there was so much in terms of the science and the background, and I just couldn't get it all into line breaks and verse. So I knew that I wanted to try to tackle it. And the first thing that I found in moving from poetry to prose was that I needed a lot more structure than I needed in poetry. In poetry, I'm happy to have a title, a first line, a premise, and I just get into it and go. Here, I really found that I needed to kind of divide and conquer the things that I needed to write about, shuffle things around, consider things episodically. That's a much more strategic way of writing. But, you know, I still think that I find myself using some of the same imagery. I had the very disconcerting experience the very first time I read from this at a Barnes & Noble in New York of finding 3 paragraphs in a row where I had buried internal rhyme in the, literally the second and fourth sentences of the paragraph were end rhymed. And I was kind of going, oh no, the poet's getting revenge. So, you know, I think that's still my primary impulse. But for this topic and to tell these stories, you know, prose was a nice change of pace. So, yes?
Sandra, did you outgrow any of the severe?
Unfortunately not. I have a mildly improved tolerance to soy, which I try to maintain by using sometimes soy sauce with my sushi, but I still can't have tofu or edamame or any of those, you know, soy proteins or solids. In fact, a lot of my allergies have gotten worse. Cashews, mangoes, shrimp in particular have really approached an anaphylactic stage with very little exposure that would not have been true 10 years ago. So, you know, I mean, I think there used to really be a common break point where kids would often grow out of allergies around, say, age 13, but we're hopeful, but we're not currently seeing that with the kids right now. Yeah?
Have you developed any new ones?
Well, it's hard to say because, understandably, I chose to have a very conservative diet for a very long time. I mean, I literally, for my first 20 years, there were so many foods that I just didn't try. They weren't worth the risk. You know, mushrooms, eggplant, which I had no reason to be suspicious of except it had egg in the name. You know, and so it was really, it's hard for me to know whether some of those allergies were present in childhood because I didn't test them. I still haven't tried lobster. If anybody wants to buy me dinner and help me discover whether or not I have a lobster allergy, I would be happy to work with you on that. But, you know, there's still unknowns. Yeah?
How did you go about doing research for the book?
Oh, gosh. You know, I really had to look at a variety of both print, online. Certainly there are some great groups like the Food Allergy Initiative and the Food Allergy and Anaphylaxis Network that have some basic boilerplate info, because I knew it was important for me to cover not just my experience and my allergies, but other people's. I mean, for example, I'm not allergic to peanuts. There's a huge body of research and discussion attached to that. I also traveled to the Quad AI conference, which is for allergy, asthma, and immunology. That year, their conference was held in New Orleans, and I attended all of that conference that I could. I sat in on a press conference with the 3 top allergists in the country. So I got really the latest of the cutting-edge research on oral immunotherapy, where the science is going now. So, I mean, the interesting thing about this topic is that there's always more, both in terms of the data coming forward, but also just people's individual stories. It's a very, very quirky medical condition, and I'm constantly amazed by the new data that I get, even now after the book is out, just from talking to people. Yes?
So the things that you were allergic to, do they test you for? I mean, like cucumbers, how did you ever, did you have allergy tests to find out what food you
Yeah, there's 3 different ways that people refer to as testing allergy. One is simply oral food challenge, which means you try a little bit of a food and you see what happens. And then, you know, somebody who once didn't quite know what I was talking about said, it's like you duel with the food, kind of. And I'm like, yeah, and if the food wins, it's not pretty. But, you know, there's oral food challenge. There is Rast testing, which is the blood-based testing. Now, the good thing about that is that it's very non-invasive, particularly for children, where, you know, it can be very traumatic to break out in hives or to have an anaphylactic response. The bad news is that there's a ton of false positives associated with Rast testing. For example, it claimed that I was allergic to pineapple and rice, which were two huge staples in my childhood diet. So the third method of diagnosis in the middle is what's often called a prick test, an elegant name, in which you may be familiar with, in which they literally apply little pinpricks to a section of your skin and then apply little concentrated allergen doses, and they wait to see how the skin responds. I honestly feel that in order for something to be confirmed as a true food allergy, you certainly need to have confirmation in at least 2 of those testing arenas, if not 3. Relying on any one of those might be helpful in choosing a food to avoid, but it doesn't really tell you whether it's an allergy. So, and yes, I went through all of them and still continue to periodically go through all of them. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, yes.
I hope this isn't too personal, but I'm curious if your mother nursed you as a baby.
I refuse to breastfeed. Yeah, I just took a stand. No, you know, and the thing is that what we now know in hindsight is it might have been that she was ingesting so many things that I was allergic to that it was coming down through the breast milk. So it's hard to say whether my reaction was actually to the breast milk or to all the food proteins present in it. But either way, I refused to breastfeed. They tried to give me milk. I refused the milk. They tried to give me goat's milk. I refused the goat's milk. They were trying to give me soy. I refused the soy. So in my first month, I had lost a severe amount of weight and was malnourished, and I had to go back in. And when I say refused, I mean both. I, you know, tried to avoid feeding on it, but also if I did have it, my body wouldn't process it. It would just go straight through. So it was rough.
How did you survive?
Water, pineapple juice mixed with calglucon, which is a supplement. Yeah, and you know, rice and cream chicken as soon as they could add it in, which predicted a young childhood where many of my meals, certainly when I was out, were, you know, boiled chicken, plain baked potato, maybe plain rice, but often the rice would have margarine in it. So really simple diet for the first 10 years of my life. Were there questions on this side? Yeah.
Is there any particular food out of all the stuff that you're allergic to that makes you curious enough to want to try, but you're too allergic to?
I'm not that motivated, but I get cravings for cinnamon rolls, which is really frustrating because I've never had them and have no idea what that texture is like. But there was a Cinnabon in the mall when I was growing up, and I would walk by, and I would be like going to the perfume counter trying to banish that scent because it just triggered this really strong craving. Socially, I really wish I could have eaten pizza, just because I grew up in an age where pizza parties were like the mode. And not only could I not eat the pizza, but the pizza oil would get everywhere, and I really had to be careful. I remember often when we would have class pizza parties, I would get sent to the library because it was just safer that way. And then the worst part was we had those, let me make myself sound pathetic. No, we had those monthly contests where you would get stickers for each book you read. I always won in my class. I was such a bookworm. And the prize was a gift certificate for a free personal pizza at Pizza Hut. Every time. I had like a dozen of those by the end of the year. And, you know, so pizza and cinnamon rolls, the way to my heart, but you'll have to resuscitate me afterwards. Any other questions? Yes?
You travel a lot now. You're in long stretches of the interstate and all. Is that a concern about, or you pretty well got this where you can avoid the ER now?
No, I travel a lot alone, and because of my touring for the book, and it is difficult. I had a really severe reaction when I was alone in Miami at the beginning of the year, where I had underestimated the severity of your reaction, and I was attempting to drive home. I'd actually been in a place where cashew butter had been on something I was eating. I thought it was tahini. I didn't recognize. And the ironic thing was that they were priding themselves on taking care of me in terms of my allergies, which often raw foods and vegetarian food places think they're allergy friendly. Maybe not. The reaction was so severe that I started to go into shock on the drive home. I tried to call friends to tell them that I was having a medical emergency, and they could no longer decipher my voice on the phone to be able to tell where I was. I was in South Beach, Miami alone at night on a Friday night. and I pulled over in front of a luxury hotel, leaned over and literally vomited into oncoming traffic on South Beach, and then immediately turned to the shocked concierge and said, "I'm not drunk, I swear." And then ended up going to the hospital, but also had to frantically call around until I got somebody to come move my car out of traffic and get my car home while the other friends took me to the hospital. And that's, you know, those are the types of adult issues of traveling and living with food allergies that people don't necessarily think about. So it is very difficult. It's an ongoing challenge. Yes?
Where's your EpiPen, girl?
It's right over here.
Where was it on all these occasions?
It's always with me. I think that if I were to recommend to others how to care for their allergies, I would recommend more frequent use of EpiPen than I tend to pursue. Part of it's just having been raised in a culture that really resisted it. Part of it is also the expense. That's one of the things that I'm really talking with some of the food allergy groups about. I think that when you're, for example, when I'm here in Mississippi, my health insurance doesn't cover me as fully down here. So if I'm going to go into the hospital, that's like a $200 investment and minimum. And so it's really tricky because those little things add up, and sometimes that, for example, is probably a night that I should have used my EpiPen and I didn't. But hindsight's 20/20. But you, on the other hand, I license to inject me at any given time. I kind of trust Lisa, and I know I'm not the only one who carries an EpiPen in this room. So there was a question back there.
Oh, he asked it earlier.
Oh, okay, great. Yes?
Did you outgrow your asthma, or?
My asthma's much better than it used to be. It used to really be chronic. It interfered with any kind of casual exercise, exacerbated by outdoor allergens. I have been on, not that I want to give a product plug, but I've been on a Allegra, which for me has been a really, really stabilizing drug for a number of years. I found Allegra after 3 previous allergy medications that also helped with my asthma. I had developed intolerances to because there were tiny amounts of milk derivative used in the binding of the pill. So 3 brands in a row, my body started rejecting. Every time I would take it, I would get rashes up and down my arm. So I'm really hoping this last one continues to work for me because it's one of those funny issues. I don't have a plan E, so to speak. Are there any other questions? I know we're kind of heading on. We might just have time for one more. Or we might just break. And yes?
Have you ever met anyone who has the same as many allergies and food issues?
This is one of those rare times when I get to say I am special, but I'm not that special. I mean, I've met people. I have met people with quite comparable allergies in terms of the severity and the multiplicity. There's also a lot of other conditions that can cause these types of severe dietary restraints. But you know, I think it's important to realize that when the media talks about cures or treatments for food allergies, it's very, very difficult to treat people like me who have a combination of not only anaphylactic severe allergies, but multiple of them. Because you can really only treat for one allergy at a time with a lot of the treatments that we're looking at safely. So for me, if each one of those treatments requires a span of, say, 18 months, you know, for me to be anything near cured or even improved in my tolerance would be a decade investment. So it's, you know, there are many other people like me out there. If somebody has my exact set of allergies, we should talk. We would make for quite the dinner date, if nothing else. But yeah. So I think that's probably good, unless anybody else has a burning question. I will be happy to talk with folks after the reading, and I believe hopefully we'll have a chance to sign some books and have another glass of whatever it is that you're enjoying tonight. Thank you guys so much. I'm really honored to be here.